Good morning. You can see we're still in a drought, so please pray for rain for Central Texas. It's good to see all of you. This morning I'm going to talk about Matthew 6:23. It's part of the Sermon on the Mount, and it's a very interesting and curious passage. It's Jesus talking, of course. It's the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is talking about money and possessions and value and happiness. And he, in the middle of this talk, he says something that is applicable to much more than just possessions and money and all that. It's applicable to all of our lives in every area. Let me explain. He says, the eyes are the lamp of the body. If your eye is unhealthy, the whole body is full of darkness. But if your eyes are healthy, then the whole body's full of light because you can see, and so the body doesn't bump into things. He wasn't talking about the eyes at all, though. He was using the eyes as a metaphor for the human heart, because right before it he says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And after it, he talks about worry and not worrying and seeking first God's kingdom and his righteousness. And so think about what he's saying. If your heart is healthy, then your whole life is full of life and light. But if your heart is unhealthy, your whole life is full of darkness. The example of the eyes is a metaphor for our heart, our human heart. And let me explain how this works out. Imagine, and it's happened, I think, to all of us, imagine a spouse pining away, wishing that their husband or their wife would do everything that they expect them to do, that they would meet their needs. And when we get married, truth be told, a big part of what makes us go to the altar and promise to be somebody's spouse is what we're going to get out of it. We have learned to trust this person is going to be a spouse for me. And oftentimes we're not thinking so much about being a good spouse for them, at least not as much. And when we're not, our heart is unhealthy. So later, 10 years into the marriage, 20 years into the marriage, 30 years into the marriage, 40 years into the marriage, we might be sitting around wishing we had somebody else, or wishing if our spouse would just start doing the things that we want them to do and not doing the things that get on our nerves, then life would be good. And we think life can't be good unless they do that. And so we get unhappy and grouchy and perturbed. And then when they finally do some of those things, sometimes we're not even that grateful because we're thinking of all the long time that we waited, or we're thinking of all the other things that they haven't done yet. And all the while we think the problem is them, but actually it's our heart. Because everyone in this world is imperfect, and nobody's going to serve us perfectly, and not a spouse, not a child, not a parent. And so if we think that our happiness is dependent upon another person getting it, that's not true. Maybe you could say, if you want to separate happiness from joy and say happiness is life going the way you want to, then you might say it can bring you some kind of happiness. But it doesn't then bring you true joy, because true joy comes from the blessings and promises of God. It comes from also the changes that God makes in our heart to give us peace and direction. True joy comes from peace and direction. The peace of the grace of God that covers our past with forgiveness and mercy. The peace that everything's going to be okay because God's working everything for our good. And the peace that the future is going to be as bright as God and I will make it, with the love of God working in my heart. So when your heart is changed by the promises of the gospel, you think about forgiving your mate. You think about blessing your mate. You think about being a servant rather than being served. And your heart now is filled with light. And just like the eyes, when they can see the whole body safe, when your heart, when it can see that the main thing is to be a servant who's filled with God's love and is sharing it with even a spouse that's not meeting all your needs, or an adult child, or a grandparent that's not meeting all your needs. Since you're a servant, you're filled with light. And you run toward people and you bless people. And actually, what happens usually is they are more want to help you and meet your needs because they see what a wonderful person you are in meeting theirs. You have broken the stalemate by not being selfish anymore. Selfishness is self-centeredness, and that is a darkness in our heart, which leads the whole life into darkness. But being selfless and a servant of others leads the whole life into beauty and light and happiness, and makes friends for you, and it makes friends out of your family. So, listen to Jesus when he says, the eyes are the lamp of the body. If they're full of darkness, the body's full of darkness. If they're full of light, the body's full of light. What he really means is the heart is the lamp of the body, of the soul and the person, of the whole person. The heart is the lamp of the person. If the heart is unhealthy because it's selfish, the whole life will be full of darkness. But if it's selfless and a servant freed up by the grace of God, then the whole life will be full of light and joy of serving God and others with a peaceful heart, knowing you're making a wonderful impact, and that you are safe in God forever, even when there's a drought. Hey, have a great day in Jesus, and remember, he's made your heart healthy, so let that express itself in your relationships, and stop sitting around wishing other people would make you happy.